Good Saturday, everyone, and welcome into today's Daily Bible reading for Saturday. Today is August the 27th, and we are reading today from Zechariah chapter 7 and also from John chapter 11. We got the 7-11 chapters up for today, beginning in Zechariah chapter 7. Let me go ahead and get that on the screen for us so we can read along together. We are past the 8 visions that are mentioned in the first 6 chapters of the writing of Zechariah, and now we're going to get to the conclusion of these visions and kind of the conclusion of the things that are historically taking place at this time as they're going about the process of rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, rebuilding the temple and such. Here are some questions that they have on their minds that are kind of subjects of consideration among the people at this time. This first chapter, in chapter 7, is going to focus, as you can see in the subtitle, on disobedience and fasting. So let's begin reading here in chapter 7 and verse number 1. Zechariah chapter 7, verse number 1. In the 4th year of King Darius, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah on the 4th day of the 9th month, which is Chislev. Now the people of Bethel had sent Sharezer, Regem-melech, and their men to plead for the Lord's favor by asking the priests who were at the house of the Lord of armies, as well as the prophets, should we mourn and fast in the 5th month, as we have done these many years? Now, the subject of mourning and fasting, what I can gather, there were 4 fasts that were taking place during the time of the exile. There was a fast that was done to commemorate the time whenever Nebuchadnezzar took Jerusalem. Then there was the instance where the temple was burnt, when Gedaliah was murdered, and the 4th one, the siege of Jerusalem. So should we continue in these fasts? Well, here's the answer. Then the word of the Lord came to the word of the Lord of armies came to me. Ask all the people of the land and the priests, have you fasted and lamented in the 5th and the 7th months for these 70 years? Did you really fast for me? So when you did this, did you really fast for me? When you eat and drink, don't you eat and drink simply for yourselves? Aren't these the words that the word of the Lord proclaimed through the earlier prophets when Jerusalem was inhabited and secure, along with its surrounding cities, and when the southern region and the Judean footholds were inhabited? Where the Lord came to Zechariah. The Lord of armies says this: make fair decisions, show faithful love and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the resident alien or the poor, and do not plot evil in your hearts against one another. But they refused to pay attention and turned a stubborn shoulder. They closed their ears so they could not hear. They made their hearts like rock, so as to not obey the law or the words that the Lord of armies had sent by his Spirit through the earlier prophets. Therefore, intense anger came from the Lord of armies, just as he had called, and they would not listen. So when they called, I would not listen, said the Lord of armies. I scattered them with the windstorm over all the nations that had not known them, and the land was left desolate behind them, with no one coming and going. They turned a pleasant land into a desolation. As we think about now they're in this situation, should we continue mourning? Should we continue fasting? And the Lord asks the question, well, were you really fasting for me to begin with? Were you really fasting because you were heartbroken? Well, if you're heartbroken, why not do the word? Why not do the works that would have pleased the Lord to begin with? That's what you need to focus on. The Lord doesn't want just fasting and mourning. No, the Lord wants to see faithfulness that is exemplified in obedience to the covenant and honoring God through honoring the covenant. If you want to know what's right, that's what you need to do. So concerning this issue of fasting, no, you don't have to fast. God just wants you to do what's right. God wants you to be faithful to the covenant. And then chapter 8 is going to take that idea of fasting and say, in fact, what God is going to do is he's not only going to take the fasting away from you, but he's going to turn the fasting into feasting. Why? Well, because there's going to be a celebration of the Lord's faithfulness. There's going to be a celebration of the restoration and renewal that God is going to bring to his people in the new kingdom and in this renewal and restoration of all things. So we're going to flip it from chapter 7, which focuses on fasting and disobedience, into this idea of feasting and faithfulness and obedience to God in chapter 8. So we'll read about that tomorrow on Sunday whenever we read together in Zechariah chapter 8. To finish off today's reading, John chapter 11. John chapter 11, one of the most captivating stories, I think, in John's gospel, the raising of Lazarus. One of the most awesome stories of John's gospel because of the incredible ramifications of exactly what is taking place here. Let's read about it together in John chapter 11, verse number 1. Now, a man was sick, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent a message to him, Lord, the one you love is sick. When Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, Jesus stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews try to stone you, and you're going there again? Verse number 9, Jesus answered, aren't there 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. Then the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will get well. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus then told them plainly, Lazarus has died. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe, but let's go to him. Then Thomas, called Twin, said to the fellow disciples, you could just see this. You just imagine this. Let's go to so that we may die with him. Well, if he's going to go die, we might as well go die with him too. That you can almost see the exasperation almost on the part of the apostles. Oh, here he goes again. All right, boys, saddle up. We got to go do this thing. Verse 17, when Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. When Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to Jesus. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were there with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary got up quickly and went out, and they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to cry there. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her crying, and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved within his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying? There, everybody's thinking, Jesus, you've done all these things. Why couldn't you have been here to heal him? Why couldn't you have come faster to prevent all this from happening? It's too late now. You can almost see that within their minds. It's too late. Verse 38, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, there is already a stench because you've been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? So they removed the stone, and then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and with his face wrapped in cloth. Jesus said to them, unwrap him and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and were saying, what are we going to do since this man is doing many signs? If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. One of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. You're not considering that it is to your advantage that one man should die for the people, rather than the whole nation perish. He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but to unite the scattered children of God, so from that day on they plotted to kill him. They plotted to kill Jesus. Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but departed from there to the countryside near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and stayed there with the disciples. Now the Jewish Passover was near. Many went up to Jerusalem from the country to purify themselves before the Passover. They were looking for Jesus and asking one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think? He won't come to the festival, will he? The chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it so they could arrest him. John chapter 11. Now, of course, the point we want to make is what in this text shows us that Jesus is God. And of course, this is the greatest sign that Jesus performed that is recorded within the Gospels, and really the greatest sign that Jesus ever performed among people on earth. It was taking someone who was dead. Not just, we're not talking, was resuscitated after 20 minutes or so. We're talking about somebody who had been in the grave so long that his body was decomposing. He was stinking. He was so dead that he stank. And yet, Jesus still called him forth, put spirit and life back into the body and brought him forth. And this certainly shows us that Jesus is God, for only one has the true power of life, and that is God. God in the beginning breathed life into mankind. Here is Jesus breathing life into Lazarus again. And certainly this is the greatest sign that Jesus is the Son of God. He is truly the author of life. Thanks so much for tuning into this reading. Hope that you have a great rest of your Saturday. Hope that we'll contemplate the reality that Jesus is the author of life, that life is found in him. That's not only true from a spiritual perspective, or wasn't only true from a physical perspective for Lazarus, but it is true for a spiritual perspective for us, that he brings us life, though we were dead in our trespasses. And in the end, at the time of the resurrection, he will breathe life into us again, and we will have life for eternity in him. Again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Saturday, everyone. Looking forward to reading with you again in the morning from Zechariah chapter 8 and John chapter 12. Zechariah 8 and John 12 are on the schedule for tomorrow. Looking forward to reading with you then, 8 o'clock in the morning. Take care and God bless.